Screens! Hey everyone, welcome to 3D Make It. I'm Greg. Today I'm talking to you about screens. That's right. I may look like a Big Tree fanboy. I've got my SKR, but I've also got my MKS boards. These screens are quite nice. I wanted to talk a little bit about the different uses for the screens, what would be appropriate, what wouldn't, and what are the drawbacks if you use a certain type not versus another. So the screens have two operating modes. They have the LCD 128/64. It's set up as a standard RepRap full graphics controller when you're in that mode. That mode runs off of the Marlin menu system. So if you're running an Ender, you've seen it, or any of the Creality printers and a lot of the older printers, they all have a similar type of display. The full graphics part just allows you to actually have images versus the standard text displays, which again, you couldn't have images. You could put a little text and do a little fancy stuff. You have an SD card reader and a USB reader. Those are still accessible in that mode. Now the touchscreen mode on these does a number of things that you don't have to rely on just the motherboard and Marlin. The way the touchscreen mode in these works is it actually is sending G-code commands. So if you want to level the print bed and you push the auto level button, it's sending a G29. If you hit the level corners, it's actually going to do, a G0, Z0, X10, Y10, and it's going to send that command and your head's going to move to that position. So each button is pre-programmed with the G-code that is being sent as a serial command to your printer. So if you don't run a console or you're not connecting your computer to it, you can still send a lot of the commands that you would for G-code to the printer to do those settings. So this is basically acting like a small computer. This is a 32-bit processor. It's actually a lot more powerful than a lot of the 8-bit boards out there that are running the printers. The screen is actually more powerful. Having both modes is kind of nice because if you have a preference or you have a printer, you just want to upgrade the screen, but you're not sure if you want to do touch, having both available is nice so you can compare the difference and contrast them. When you are in the Marlin mode, you are sending just input signals from your dial directly to your motherboard, and those signals are then relayed back to the screen. You're not sending G-code itself. So keep that in mind when you're doing these screens. So the other thing I wanted to mention, because one of our subscribers had a problem. He was running a Raspberry Pi with Octoprint on it, and he had a really long print, and it failed because the filament ran out. It just kept printing. The screen he was using was the stock screen on the Anycubic, and it has a filament runout sensor. But because he was plugged in to the USB and streaming all of his code to the printer from a Raspberry Pi or a computer, doesn't matter, you lose the filament runout sensor. You lose some of the settings because those settings are actually controlled by the 32-bit controller in the screen, and you're not using that. That is why connecting your USB or your SD card and having your file print from the screen is advantageous if you are going to use the feature of a filament runout sensor and that sort of thing. This will actually pause the job, allow you to replace the filament, start the job, and continue, because it's all stored on this. So any printer out there that you see that has these advanced features, if you use a PC, a Mac, and connect it and are printing from Cura, for example, or printing directly a file with Pronterface, you lose those built-in features of the printer. So be aware of that. Some people don't realize that. Now, can you get nerdy and connect your filament runout sensor directly to your Raspberry Pi and your Octoprints instance to be able to utilize those types of features? Absolutely. Can you enable filament runout in Marlin and utilize the pins directly on your board to do filament runout? Yes, you can. But typically, their filament runout and whatnot is connected to your screen. So just be aware of that. Now let's get into some of the demos of the screens. Okay, so here are our boards. We have the BigTreeTech TFT 2.4 version 1.1. And we have the BigTreeTech TFT35 version 3. Very similar board, so I'm just going to go over the differences quickly. This one has an SD card, USB, and EXP1 and EXP2 connections. So this will fit the majority of the boards out there. We also have our independent 5 volts power if you need to power it independently from the main board. We then have our connector for our TFT display, which is basically our serial connection to the board USB. This is for programming the chip only, and the way they have it set up, you can program and reflash and everything, which I'll show you a little later, from the SD card, so you don't ever need to use this port at all. So that's the basic layout. So USB SD. We have the click wheel. It clicks, has a nice knob, which I have off right now. Scrolling's pretty good. Speaker, reset button, and obviously the touchscreen. The 3.5, bigger screen for sure. All the same front features. We've got the knob, the reset, the buzzer. We've got USB on here. We've got SD. Again, we have chip programming, which we aren't going to use. We've got independent 5 volt power. We've got filament runout sensor. Then we have a couple other UARTs available for other types of sensors, that sort of thing for future use. We have EXP1, 2, and 3. This display is very easy to connect to the Ender with EXP3. We also have the ESP8266 Wi-Fi module here, which you can install. I haven't tried that yet. And then our TFT connection. So this one, the 3.5, does have a lot more connectivity options, allowing filament runout and whatnot. But both of these do run in dual mode, both touchscreen and the other mode. All right, we're going to open a project. We're going to open the BigTreeTech platform, and we're going to open it. So on the side here, we've got our project. We're going to go into our folder and find our configuration.h. And this is where you can set up your printer if you have more than one extruder. You can set it up here. You can have your bed temperature. If you don't like to go over 110, you can limit it down. Hot end. If you only want to limit it to 235, you can limit that here. You can designate more than one fan. So if you have 2 fans that you control, you can do that here also. Bed size, this is obviously set up for an Ender, 235 by 235. So mine is actually 430. Whoops, 410 by 410 by 430 by 400 or 450. I can't remember. Anyway, so you set your pause settings. If you don't have auto bed leveling, you can turn it off in here, and that icon won't show up. You can define where your leveling points are with the absolute value or a relative value based on what you put in there for your bed size. If you have a power supply that is like ATX power supply, you can have it turn off your printer, but if it's always on, you just leave it to true. Most people in our printers have the always on power supply, so there you go. Filament runout sensor, if you're enabling it or not, you can find it here. Again, everything, if you want black and green, black and white, you show it here. Boot screen, whether you show it, what you want to call it. You can call it 3D Make It. Full screen doesn't work on the smaller screens. That would just get rid of the one piece off the top. Again, SD card support, whether you're going to have it or not. And home after power loss if you're using the power loss detection. All right, there are other settings you can dig in here, but once you have that done, you can just compile it. And away we go. And this is obviously doing it for the TFT 3.0, 3.5. Boom, done. So once that's done, you can then take the firmware, put it on the SD card, and flash. And away you go. Now, if we look at the output folder, it put it in. You can see the firmware is right here. It's in the build folder. So if we look at that folder, build root, oops, PIO, build. Here's our firmware right there. You can see it's 24.1. They just came out with this update today to address a couple of issues they had, which is pretty nice that they update their firmware so regularly. And then we will just put it on the SD card, and we can then flash it to our unit. Okay, so I've got my SD card. I'm inserting it in. Sorry about how dark it is. In order for you to see the screen, I had to adjust my exposure. So you'll see why in a second. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to power up the screen. And as soon as I power up the screen, it's going to look on the SD card. Found the firmware. Now it's flashing it. Now it's adding the fonts from the folder we put on the SD card. Now it's going to finish the fonts, and then it'll start the icons. So it's looking for new icons, and it found them, and you can see it's now loading any new icons or changed icons. There we go. Okay, so all we have to do is connect up the TFT. We connect our 2 power pins and our data pins, and we leave the reset pin off because the reset we're not going to be using. Then we can take our EXP2. Now, I have noticed that on the MKS board and on another board I had, in order for it to work, you actually have to flip the connector. So EXP1 gets flipped and EXP2 gets flipped. So I had to cut the notch off. But once you do that, it works fine. Now, if you have an SKR board, you do not have to flip these. The pinout is correct. So I'm going to demonstrate this mode, then I'm going to switch modes, and I'm going to demonstrate the other mode. So what I'm going to do in this scenario, you see the printer is ready, we're connected. I'm going to go into the fan mode, and I'm going to turn the fan on full. You can see, I don't know if you can hear it or not, but you can see the light to the fan is on. And now it's off. Turn it on again. And off. There you go. So that is controlling the fan from the TFT cable. So now we're going to switch mode. So you hold down. Now we'll switch into Marlin mode. So now you can see I can turn my selector. I get info. Got a connection error because I don't have them hooked up right. So now if we go to temperature and then fan speed, I've turned my fan on, turn my fan off. So you can do both very easily, switch back and forth between modes. It works the same on the large screen and the small screen. Your connectivity is just more limited on your small screen, but you can still load custom icons and whatnot. We'll go back to touch mode. Boot it up, and boom, we're back. Now give it a second, and now we're connected. And we can go back and turn on the fan again. Now, if you take an SD card and insert it, it says card inserted. I don't know why we got an SD card failed. Now we can go print from SD card. Oh, apparently it doesn't like that SD card. Okay, let's grab this SD card. Don't like the FT card, but there you go. You can see the connection is working fine. And if we take a USB drive, insert it in, probably won't read it. Oh, it does. There you go. You can, away you go. All right. So there you have it. Now, if we boot to Marlin mode, there we go. So we're going to boot Marlin. I'm going to take the SD card. Media inserted. Print from media. There we go. If you have your files on here, you can now boot from it. There we go. Media removed. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my custom files on the SD card. So I'm going to oops, wrong one. So you can see I have all my custom icons here. So what I need to do is copy this folder, just this folder, to my SD card. Where is my send? There it is. Send to is hiding on me. So I'm going to send these custom icons. Now you can make your own custom icons. What you have to do is take them, import them into a program like Photoshop, adjust them. If you are very talented, you can create all of your own icons. I am not that talented, so I only customized what was already there. Okay, so it is on there. If we go to the USB drive, there it is. If we don't want to load the fonts, we can just delete this folder. And then because we have no firmware in the root of this folder and we only have the fonts and the icons, that's all it's going to do when we insert the card. There we go. Processes all the icons. And voila. Now up to date. So I'm just going to go through and show you not all the icons changed. So I want them all to change. So I'm going to insert the SD card again. I made sure I had the correct icons on there. And now we go into settings, more, and all our custom icons are there now. Are the two units. I have put custom icons on the bottom one, and then I've got the traditional stock icons on the top one. Everything works the same. We go into settings, right? This one obviously has filament runout sensor. This one doesn't. They both have the more menu, which allows you to go in, and this one allows you to customize the colors of the other environment. So if I hold this, I can go into Marlin mode, which is the 128/64 graphic screen, and I will go into Marlin mode on this one. But you see how it's yellow and black? That's hard to see on there. Well, I'm going to change the color. So I'm going to go back to touch mode. Go into settings, go into more. So I'm going to make it a red background with yellow writing. Sure. That should show up on the screen. Okay, so I've set that. I'm going to go switch modes to Marlin mode. There we go. Red background, yellow. So you can customize your colors. There's quite a few colors, combinations available. Some of them look better than others. And it's simple with this new firmware. Now, the previous firmware, you couldn't do that without recompiling the whole thing, but they've added and exposed those new settings. So I really give props to BigTree for updating their firmware, and hopefully they continue to do that. So a little hard to see. I tried to adjust the screen as much as possible, but we can send a G29 and it says home XYZ first. Okay. So I sent my G28, and obviously this isn't hooked up to a printer, but you get the idea. Well, as you can see, those screens are pretty nice. I'm looking forward to getting into just an all touch screen. The big difference is you're not going to have the other Marlin mode, and it's just going to be the full graphics. But if you have a printer that you want to upgrade the screen on, maybe you update it to a SKR or MKS board from one of the stock boards and you want more functionality, adding a new screen is quite nice. I still mostly run headless myself, and both my printers have a Raspberry Pi with Octoprint running on them. That way I can monitor my jobs remotely. I really like these screens so far. I like the fact that the GitHub is being constantly updated with new firmware. When I received these, you weren't able to switch modes to Marlin to graphics. You didn't have the ability to send individual G-code commands, which you do now. So they've just in the week since I've got them, they've done a lot of updates to both these boards. And so I'm pretty impressed with that so far. Hopefully they keep it up. I would like to see a better documentation on implementing the Wi-Fi adapter. I did pick one up, and I will be looking at trying it out and seeing what it can do. Being that I already have a Raspberry Pi with Octoprint, I like to be able to remote in and adjust things. I'm just not sure how feature rich the Wi-Fi adapter will be or what they expose to you through it. I haven't seen any firmware on their site for it, so I will have to see if someone comes up with some settings for it. So I hope you guys learned something. Please like, subscribe, and thanks for watching. See you next time.